So I've already filmed this video. I actually filmed videos for Saturday and Sunday, but due to a series of unfortunate events, they're all gone. Here we go, diving into the wrap-up again. I read 7 books this month. My ratings were all over the place a little bit. I did read a variation of genres as well, and funny enough, some of my favorite books of the month were books that I read this week without a reading vlog, so some of my favorite books are gonna be a surprise to you guys. So as always, we are starting the video off with the lowest rated book, working our way up to the highest rated. So we're gonna start with The Shining by Stephen King. I am very aware that this is a lot of people's favorite Stephen King book, so I know that this is a bummer for a lot of you. And I did go in really expecting to enjoy it. I loved Pet Sematary. I really enjoyed Misery. I thought I'd like The Shining too. And I will say that the horror elements of this book were wonderfully done. But King is a very character-focused writer, and I guess that can be a hit or miss, because if you can't connect with the characters, you don't care about all the character work that's being done. I have connected with his characters in the other 2 books of his that I've completed. I did not with these characters. There is so much time spent focusing on primarily Jack, I think is the main character's name, primarily on his backstory and his writing and his research and his slow descent. And I just didn't care. It felt like so much unnecessary downtime, and a lot of it did play in really well together. So I did appreciate the amount of care King put into it, but it doesn't change the fact that it was so boring for me to read. I said this in my review, which I'll link in the corner as well as in the description. It's a spoiler-free review, so you can check it out if you want to hear more of my thoughts on it. But essentially, I went in looking for a horror novel, and instead, I got a really boring book with a couple of horror scenes in it. But there wasn't as much horror in this book. There wasn't as much haunted hotel as I wanted. And the ending was fantastic. I will say that. Great ending. Better than the movie as far as the ending goes. Good job on the ending, King. I will also say, if you haven't read The Shining yet and you're considering it, don't let me detour you, because a lot of people love The Shining. It seems to have pretty mixed reviews. A lot of people, after I posted my reviews, said that they also didn't like it. So yeah, it has mixed reviews, but a lot of people love it, so definitely still check it out if you're interested in it. Next, I have The Steel Cave by Isaac Asimov. So we've discussed this. I'm not big on detective stories. I love thrillers, I love suspense, I love mysteries, but murder mystery detective from the perspective of the detective solving the mystery, for whatever reason, doesn't appeal to me. I've never once seen it done in a way that I've liked. That doesn't mean I'm done trying. In fact, in my TBR video that I just posted, I have another one on there. I have 2 more detective stories on my TBR. So even though this seems to not be the type of thing that I tend to enjoy, I still love Asimov's writing. I love the worlds he creates, the way he uses his AIs, and the scenarios he comes up with about a world that uses AIs to the extent that his worlds do. He's so smart, and I feel like with his books, I'm getting the opportunity to explore his brain a little bit, and it's awesome. So even though these detective stories don't follow a theme that I tend to enjoy, I still really enjoy reading his books. So I'm going to continue reading his books in the order that he recommends reading them. A lot of you guys are recommending that I just skip these books and get straight to Foundation. Not gonna do it. I'm gonna follow Asimov's reading list for his own books, and I'm gonna keep reading these, and I will get to Foundation eventually. Next, I have Year One by Nora Roberts. So this is a post-apocalyptic fantasy that's written in a contemporary style way. So Nora Roberts is a contemporary author primarily, but she does write some fantasy. This book specifically is a post-apocalyptic book. It's okay, so this isn't a spoiler because it happens on the first page, but a man shoots down a bird and that causes the apocalypse. I cannot explain to you why, because that explanation doesn't come until a while later, but it's a pretty intriguing start, and the descent of the world is pretty interesting, and in general, I really like post-apocalyptic settings, but I rarely ever have given a post-apocalyptic book above 3 stars. And the reason why is because I don't feel like they ever quite go where I want them to go. A post-apocalyptic setting is so fascinating to me, and I really want a level of suspense and fear to come with it, because I feel like if the world truly was ending to an extent and society was crumbling and we were put in these desperate situations, I just think it would be a lot scarier anytime you interact with someone outside of your safe group. And most post-apocalyptic books that I've read, including this one, do touch on that fear, but they never take it as far as I want to go. And I guess that's what this book is. So this author is primarily a contemporary writer, and her book read in a very contemporary way, which isn't a criticism. I actually really appreciated that about this book, because most of the fantasy that I read is high epic fantasy, hard magic systems. Like, this is just so different from the fantasies that I normally read that it was pretty refreshing to read, and it was such a fast, easy, fun read. Even though the magic elements, which are much more subtle, I think the post-apocalyptic world is really the focus, and then the magic is more of a secondary thing. Even though it does play a big role, it's not, I guess, just not as prevalent as I'm used to in my fantasies. But anyway, it was a really refreshing mix-up from what I'm used to reading as far as things with magical elements go. So it's a really easy read, a really fast read. Definitely don't go in expecting, hard, epic magic and fantasy. But the main focus is on the post-apocalyptic setting, and while she did explore it well, she just didn't take it as far as I wanted her to. So that's why I'm kind of have mixed feelings, because I think it was a good book. I think it was well executed. I think it was well done. It just didn't quite give me what I wanted from it. So anyway, anybody that's read a post-apocalyptic book that is more centered around the suspense, the fear, the anxiety that would come with this kind of crumbling, would be great to read. Bird Box is the only thing I can think of, even though that's not even a post-apocalyptic world. It is very close to one. Like, the horror that's happening has made the world very similar to that, or has made the conditions for the people very similar to that. And that level of suspense, especially in the flashbacks in Bird Box, that level of suspense is what I want from my post-apocalyptic books. On that note, let's talk about The Obelisk Gate, because this is also a post-apocalyptic book. So this book is a sci fantasy, and the first book is called The Fifth Season, so I'm sure you've heard of it. And this is a scenario where I think the author did a fantastic job of depicting what I think society would truly crumble to if we really were in a situation like this, where the earth was breaking and people had to resort to such extreme scenarios, such selfish scenarios to survive. And that's probably my highest praise for this book. Is I really think that N.K. Jemisin, her world building is tops. That said, this was a middle book and it read like one. I think book one had so much intrigue to it, and there was a mystery to it, that the big reveal was phenomenal. And just in general, I think book one was masterfully written. Book two, now that the mystery has been revealed, now that the narrative thing has been solved, it honestly felt like book two was just, and here's all the information you need to know to get to book three that I couldn't give you in book one because of the narrative choice I used. There were two main perspectives used in this book. One was really interesting, and one was an entire info dump that was not interesting at all, and it bummed me out. I do have a full review for this as well. I'll put it in the corner as well as the description. It is spoiler filled, so you won't want to check it out if you haven't read this book yet, but those are the summary of my thoughts. I'm very excited for book three because she built it up. She put a lot of work into getting us ready for book three, so better be worth it. Next I have Where the Crawdads Sing, which I also have a review for. Link it in the corner and down in the description. I actually did a buddy review for this with my friend Teresa from Ivy Muse. I almost called her by her channel name. Anyway, she's linked in the description as well. Check her out. I love her. Where the Crawdads Sing is a book about a young girl who was born in an abusive family, and she lives in the marsh, in a rundown house in a swamp area, and people hate her for it. This story is her growing up and growing into a woman and developing a certain set of skills and dealing with the prejudice, and it's just kind of her life. It's a very character-focused story. On the side of that, we also have this side thing going on where somebody was killed, or they believe that this person was killed, and they're trying to find the clues, figure out the evidence, figure out how this person died, and then there's a trial that happens. But that is only done in like quick spurts. The main focus on the novel is this main character and what's going on in her life. It's a very slow-moving plot, it's a very character-focused plot, but it's really, really good. My biggest complaint with this was that it was very familiar. I've read a couple books like this already, following the exact same structure with the exact same, like, it's mainly focused on this one person's life, but here are the flashbacks about this murder, and here's the trial at the end, and here's the solution. It even had the same solution. It even was resolved in the same way. So I will say, even though I've seen this novel done before, but with different characters and a different scenario, it didn't retract from how well this novel was executed. This novel was really, really well done. The character work was great. It didn't take away from the book itself. I still highly recommend the book, especially if you haven't read a book like this before. But if you have, you may be bummed out by that little element like I was too. It was still a great read. I just wish that something had been different about it other than the character and the setting. Next, I have Wheel of Time, book 5. So I am not done with this yet. I am 200 pages from the end. I think 200, 250, but I'm filming this several days before the end of the month, so I should for sure have it done by the end of the month, and I'm hoping to have a review up for it next week. But I will say that I'm loving it. It's really interesting because I think I said this in a reading vlog already, but anyway, the first 3 books of Wheel of Time, I was like, solid, good, enjoying myself. I like Wheel of Time. But books 4 and 5, I'm like, oh man, I really am digging it. So books 4 and 5 have been so good for me. I have a lot of complaints about this series. There are a lot of things that frustrate me about it, but the good so heavily outweighs the bad. This world is massive. These characters are so easy to follow, even when you just want to yell at them. There's so much character development happening with certain characters right now. It's so much to follow. It's so much to wrap your head around, but also the fandom for Wheel of Time, while sometimes they're extreme, for the most part, the community in Wheel of Time, at least for me, has been so great. And as I'm doing my individual reviews, y'all have been explaining stuff to me and, being excited with me as I'm exploring this for the first time. And it's just been an awesome journey. And I think a large part of that has been because you guys have been so great to read these books with, but also these books are so good. So that's all I'm going to say because I'm not done with it yet and there's a review coming, but those are my overall thoughts at the moment. Okay, last 2 books I'm going to talk about you haven't heard me talk about yet. So let's start with The Prestige. Oh man, this book was good. I watched this movie about 6 or 7 years ago, and I didn't like it because it was some of the most depressed times of my life, and this movie is depressing, so it depressed me. But now, I love a good tragedy, and this book was so good. It was, well, I'm going to start out by saying, when I put this on my TBR last month, or the beginning of this month, several people said the book was really bad and I should just skip it and rewatch the movie. No, sir. This book was so good. There are some extreme differences in the book, from the book to the movie, but from what I remember of the movie, which is a lot because it was seared into my brain because it threw me into a pretty deep depression because I was already depressed and the movie was depressing. But from what I remember, the book and the movie are actually not like the main thread. They're pretty close. And it was so much fun rediscovering that story in a different format. Corey and I are going to rewatch the movie together next week, I think. But either way, this book was so good. The story itself is fantastic, but also the characters are different in the choices that they make sometimes, which I found fascinating. But just in general, as these characters have these obsessive tendencies, trying to become the best, trying to rise to the top, trying to undermine each other, and screwing everyone around them, including their spouses. Screwing as in, like, being selfish toward them. It's fine. Everything's fine. I loved the way this book was written because every one of their selfish, horrible actions and choices were written in such an offhanded, detached way that I found these characters so fascinating because these characters didn't even think about what they were doing when they were betraying people, important people in their lives, when they were going to these extreme measures, they didn't even think of them as anything. It was just life. They just continued on. I loved the way this author formatted this novel. I loved the way he wrote his characters, the way he wrote their horrible things. It was so well done, and I loved it. I understand how this book would not be for everybody, fully get that, so you may hate it. But I say give it a try, because man, did I enjoy reading this book. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this wrap-up is Animal Farm. Holy cow, did I not expect to like this book. When my dad was telling me that he read this book and that I should pick it up too, I immediately said, isn't that one with talking animals? And he goes, yes, but trust me, it's good. Which I just didn't believe. I will say that I think that the point that the author was trying to make and the purpose behind this book could not have been better executed without the animals. If that was a deterrent for you, I mean, you probably already read it. If that was a deterrent for you, it shouldn't be. I think that this book was perfectly executed. I don't even know how to describe it because the audiobook was only 3 hours long, so I hate to give you too much information, but simply put, this farm of animals is being run by a human who is not treating them well, so the animals rebel, rise up, chase the human out, and start running the farm themselves. There's some trials that go along with it, but the animals, they figure it out. It's primarily run by the pigs, primarily by this one pig named Napoleon, and it follows the animals as they rise up and become one great team, and then as this one animal, Napoleon, becomes a dictator. The things that happen, the dissent that happens and the things that happen are so disturbing at times, but man, I recommend it because it is so well executed, and the progression from the beginning to the end, I just don't think the author could have done a better job at what he was doing. It was so well done. Highly recommend this book. You should check it out. So those are some of the books that I read this month. I recommend at least trying all of them, because I don't think there was a single one that I thought this was a bad book. Just some of them didn't work out for me. Affiliate links for all of these books that I talked about down in the description, so you should check those out. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.